In recent days, Washington has entered a phase that many political observers describe as unusually volatile, not because of a single headline-grabbing event, but because of a series of coordinated developments that are unfolding simultaneously across political, legal, and institutional arenas. At the center of the discussion is a newly released congressional framework that outlines concerns regarding a former president's conduct. While no final legal judgment has been rendered and no outcome is predetermined, the structure, scale, and timing of this release have drawn intense scrutiny from constitutional scholars and political analysts alike. What immediately distinguishes this moment from previous political controversies is the methodical nature of the approach. Rather than relying on press leaks or fragmented disclosures, the materials were introduced as part of a formal institutional process. Analysts note that this strategy appears designed to shift the conversation away from partisan narratives and toward procedural legitimacy. Unlike prior episodes where attention centered on a single incident or isolated decision, the current discussion emphasizes what observers describe as patterns of behavior. Legal scholars point out that this framing reflects a broader interpretation of accountability, one that considers cumulative impact rather than focusing exclusively on discrete actions. This approach has reignited long-standing constitutional debates about the scope and purpose of congressional oversight. Some experts argue that the framers of the Constitution envisioned accountability mechanisms not merely as responses to criminal acts, but as safeguards against sustained conduct that undermines public trust. Others caution that expanding these interpretations risks politicizing constitutional tools if not handled with exceptional care. Adding to the complexity is the political alignment surrounding the issue. A number of lawmakers from across the political spectrum have publicly acknowledged the seriousness of the situation, even as they stop short of endorsing any specific outcome. Several of these legislators have emphasized that their involvement is driven by institutional responsibility rather than partisan loyalty, a framing that has become increasingly rare in modern political discourse. Political strategists suggest that this cross-party engagement serves multiple functions. On one level, it enhances the credibility of the process by signaling that concerns are not confined to a single ideological camp. On another level, it places pressure on undecided lawmakers by reframing the issue as one of constitutional duty rather than political affiliation. At the same time, observers note that this alignment does not represent unanimity. Significant disagreement remains, both within parties and across them. Supporters and critics alike have mobilized rapidly, framing the developments in starkly different terms. This divergence underscores the deeply polarized environment in which modern American institutions operate. The procedural strategy being employed has also attracted attention. Rather than immediately advancing toward a decisive vote, congressional leaders appear to be pursuing what analysts describe as a graduated escalation model. This approach maintains institutional leverage while allowing multiple potential resolution paths to remain open. According to political commentators, this strategy serves several purposes. It creates sustained public attention without forcing immediate closure. It allows space for negotiation in recalibration, and it positions formal action as a last resort rather than a foregone conclusion. In doing so, it reframes accountability mechanisms as tools of governance rather than instruments of retaliation. Public response has been swift and intense. Social media platforms have recorded elevated engagement levels, with competing interpretations spreading rapidly across different online communities. What stands out, however, is that a growing portion of the audience appears to be engaging directly with primary source materials rather than relying solely on commentary. Media researchers note that this behavior represents a potential shift in information consumption. In previous political controversies, public discourse was often dominated by summaries and interpretations filtered through partisan lenses. In this case, a notable number of users are examining original documents, timelines, and procedural explanations in an effort to form independent conclusions. This trend has been amplified by the availability of digital tools that allow citizens to search, cross-reference, and contextualize information more easily than in the past. While misinformation remains a concern, analysts suggest that increased access to primary materials may encourage more nuanced public deliberation, even within a polarized environment. Cable news networks and digital outlets have responded with near-continuous coverage. Panels of legal experts, former officials, and political strategists have debated not only the substance of the concerns, but also the broader implications for institutional norms. Some commentators warn that prolonged uncertainty could erode public confidence, while others argue that visible accountability processes ultimately strengthen democratic legitimacy. International observers are also paying close attention. Foreign policy analysts note that moments of internal accountability in the United States often carry global significance. Allied governments, financial institutions, and diplomatic partners assess such developments as indicators of institutional stability and governance resilience. Several foreign ministries have issued carefully worded statements emphasizing respect for American constitutional processes without commenting on the substance of the allegations. Diplomatic experts interpret this cautious language as an effort to balance non-interference with the recognition that U.S. political stability has far-reaching implications. Financial markets have exhibited what analysts describe as uncertainty pricing. Rather than reacting to a single anticipated outcome, investors appear to be factoring in multiple scenarios, leading to increased volatility without dramatic directional movement. This pattern suggests a wait-and-see posture rather than panic or confidence.
Beyond immediate political and economic considerations, constitutional scholars are examining the longer-term implications of this moment. If accountability mechanisms evolve to emphasize patterns of conduct, this could influence how future cases are evaluated. Supporters argue that such an evolution aligns with the original purpose of safeguarding democratic institutions. Critics caution that it could blur the line between political disagreement and constitutional violation. Another area of debate concerns timing. Actions taken during transitional or post-election periods have historically occupied a gray area in accountability frameworks. Some legal experts argue that clarifying this ambiguity is essential to closing potential gaps in democratic oversight. Others warn that retroactive scrutiny risks destabilizing transitions of power if not carefully constrained. Public discourse has also extended beyond traditional political arenas. Religious leaders, civic organizations, and academic institutions have weighed in, often framing the discussion in moral or ethical terms rather than partisan ones. These interventions may create spaces for reflection that transcend immediate political loyalties. Business leaders and industry associations have likewise responded with statements emphasizing rule of law, predictability, and institutional integrity. While avoiding explicit positions, these voices highlight the broader societal interest in stable governance structures that function effectively under stress. As the situation continues to unfold, analysts caution against premature conclusions. Multiple procedural paths remain open, and outcomes will depend on a combination of institutional decisions, political calculations, and public response. What is clear, however, is that this moment has reignited fundamental questions about how democracies enforce accountability in an era of heightened polarization. For many observers, the significance of this development lies less in its immediate resolution and more in what it reveals about the resilience of constitutional systems. Can institutions designed centuries ago adapt to modern political realities without losing their core principles? Can accountability be pursued without deepening divisions? These questions extend beyond any single figure or controversy. Ultimately, this period may come to be understood as what scholars call a constitutional stress test, a moment when the strength of democratic norms is measured not by their absence of challenge, but by their capacity to respond to challenge through established processes rather than force or improvisation. As citizens, analysts emphasize the importance of critical engagement. This means examining primary sources, listening to diverse perspectives, and resisting the pull of simplified narratives. Democratic systems rely not only on formal institutions, but on an informed public capable of distinguishing evidence from speculation. The coming weeks are likely to bring further developments, clarifications, and debates. Whether these lead to resolution, reform, or prolonged tension remains uncertain. What is certain is that the way this moment is handled will influence public trust in governance and accountability for years to come. In times like these, history reminds us that constitutional systems are not self-executing. They require participation, restraint, and a shared commitment to principles that transcend immediate advantage. How this chapter unfolds will reflect not only institutional choices, but collective values about power, responsibility, and the rule of law.